Hey YouTubers, it's me, Lonnie Clark, Nuts for Art again, although you know that because you're here. I'm going to start this book. And I thought when I first picked it up that I was going to just poke around because I saw something called Corporate Madness and the Death Merchants, Chapter 4. But I think I'm going to continue with from the very get-go. I'm going to skip the introduction because I want to get to this because I don't know if I'm going to get a strike. Helen Caldicott gave me permission to read this book over the air. And as I was creating the bibliography, I noticed it needed to be in writing. So I hope I don't get a strike, but I'm going to start with Chapter 1. And I'm going to get right to it. And I don't know how long I'll be reading, but I don't know. I'm going to make an effort not to make them too long. Chapter 1, The Tragedy of Wasted Opportunities. Put on my funny little glasses here. The hidden hand of the market will never work without a hidden fist. McDonald's cannot flourish without McDonnell Douglas, the flyer of the F-15, and the hidden fist that keeps the world safe for Silicon Valley's technologies is called the United States Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. This was from Thomas Friedman from the New York Times Magazine, March 28, 1999. I'm going to take off my glasses and just hold the book close to my face. Imagine this. The Cold War is over. A wise and visionary, make sure this little dot is not on. No, it's going. Okay. Imagine this. The Cold War is over. The wise and visionary young American president elected in 1992 decides that now is the time to rid the world of nuclear weapons. 6 months into his first term, he flies to Moscow to meet with a pliable Russian president who agrees to sign a treaty to eliminate Russian and American nuclear weapons within 5 years. Wow. The governments of France, England, China, and Israel follow suit. India and Pakistan choose not to pursue the development of nuclear armaments as a path they are about to take. The United Nations is vested in the international community with the authority and funding to prevent lateral proliferation of nuclear weapons. Hundreds of tons of deadly plutonium are removed over the next 5 years from the world's total of 52,972 nuclear weapons. And we can probably add at least 100 more. We know Kim Jong-un has at least dozens, right? The overwhelming relief that the world will soon be free from the threat of nuclear annihilation catalyzes effective international planning and cooperation to solve the problem of where and how to store the plutonium. Oh, I'll just leave that up there. American tax dollars are diverted from massive Pentagon and corporate military budgets into projects designed to take care of the nation's people. A government-funded system of universal health care is instituted, and free state-of-the-art education from kindergarten through college gradually becomes available throughout the nation. Woohoo! And our student loan is canceled. Congress passes a law mandating that all cars built to operation at 80 miles per gallon and appropriates funding for public transportation initiatives in every state. Legislation is enacted requiring that most buildings be retrofitted to collect solar energy and that every new building be powered, heated, and cooled by solar energy. Generous safety nets are put in place, providing for the old, the poor, the sick, the indigent, and Social Security system remains immune to the work of market forces. Every American child is fully immunized, and no child will live below the poverty line. Almost 5 decades since the dawn of the atomic age, the United States of America is on the way to becoming truly secure, no longer dependent on a nuclear barricade for its safety. The nation becomes an inspirational example to all other nations as we enter the 21st century. Now blink and re-enter reality. I love Helen. A newly elected young president, touched paradoxically with hubris and timidity, who had never acquired an in-depth knowledge of the matter of military or nuclear, was handicapped by a severe leadership impediment. He had evaded the Vietnam draft. In his own mind, he never overcame this apparent character deficit. and the military that he allegedly commanded made sure he never forgot it. To exacerbate this situation, several acute personal problems of a deeply embarrassing, not to mention compromising, nature occupied this president to the point where he contemplated possible resignation and faced actual impeachment. So let us remember that the Clinton black dress investigation about Bill Clinton getting a blowjob went on for 6 years, you guys. And we have a traitor in the White House right now who's going to meet with Russia, and the Republicans, refused to hold a single hearing on the Russians manipulating or hacking into our election system. And they are feeding every bit of information that they can squeeze out of Mueller to the fucking White House. So we've got, it's not just traitor Trump. We have a treasonous GOP. So let me get back to this book, because that point really drives home when we remember how long Bill Clinton was tortured over a fucking blowjob. It just blows me away. Partly to compensate for these deficiencies, Clinton used U.S. military forces overseas in Bosnia, Iraq, and Kosovo, among other places, more frequently than any other president in the last 20 years. Further, he was the only administration since Eisenhower's that did not negotiate a single significant nuclear arms control treaty. Bill Clinton's basic disinterest, distraction, draft handicap, and lack of vision allowed the military, Pentagon, nuclear scientists, and military corporations to move into this presidential vacuum. They wooed, seduced, and bought Congress and the administrative staff, and the opportunity for nuclear disarmament was tragically lost. Ironically, as we enter the 21st century, after 8 years of a Democratic administration, the world is in a position even more dangerous than it was at the height of the Reagan buildup of nuclear weapons and the Star Wars dreams. It is against this unfortunate backdrop that the events of September 11, 2001 took place, adding ominously to the possibility of international nuclear war or nuclear accidents, as the U.S. nuclear arsenal was placed at the highest state of alert and international tensions arose. U.S. nuclear policy and weaponry has never been more aggressive. And then there are bullet points, okay? I'm going to leave that because I like that to show us that. I'm big on the peace thing now. See, this is going to be my symbol. I go get my nails manicured every couple weeks, and my hashtag is rocking the peace sign. So let me get back to these bullet points. I know I'm super distracted. The U.S. currently has 2,000 intercontinental land-based hydrogen bombs, 3,456 nuclear weapons on submarines roaming the seas 15 minutes from their targets, and 1,750 weapons on intercontinental planes ready for delivery. Of these 7,206 weapons, and I will add that we know of, roughly 2,500 remain on hair trigger alert, ready to be launched at the press of a button. Keep that in mind when you think about the lunatic in the White House. Russia has a similar number of strategic weapons, with approximately 2,000 on hair trigger alert. In total, there are now enough explosive power in the combined nuclear arsenals of the world to overkill every person on Earth 32 times. The U.S. currently has in place plans to fight and win a nuclear war, and is prepared to use nuclear weapons first if necessary. How do you win a nuclear war? Winning a nuclear war with Russia, for example, requires the use of anti-satellite weaponry to destroy Russian early warning systems, and a secret preemptive first strike attack to destroy Russian missiles before they can be launched from their silos, and preemptive destruction of the Russian nuclear subs in port and at sea, all of which capabilities are currently in place. Any Russian missiles escaping the initial attack would have to be destroyed en route to the U.S. in space, using a newly developed U.S. ballistic missile defense system. The Pentagon's official targeting plan, the Single Integrated Operation Plan, SIOP, S-I-O-P, that's what it's called, Single Integrated Operation Plan, has been upgraded since 1989. Now, this book was written, I apologize to you for that. This book is called The New Nuclear Danger. I put all the heads in there, so let me read this to you. This was published in 2002. So that was when this book was published. Okay. The Pentagon's official targeting plan, the Single Integrated Operational Plan, SIOP, has been upgraded since 1989. Instead of a total of 2,500 targets, there are now 3,000. These include 2,260 Russian sites, 1,100 of which are ostensibly nuclear facilities, 160 of which are, quote, leadership targets, government offices, and military command centers. And in parentheses, she says, in a country almost devoid of leadership. And 500 of which are disintegrating factories that produced almost no arms last year. China is now included in SIOP for the first time in 20 years, despite the fact that the U.S. Senate moved to normalize relations with China by granting it permanent normal trading relations status, PNTR, in September 2000. This country of 1.3 billion people, potentially a huge market for the U.S., has only 20 nuclear missiles capable of reaching America. And no doubt by now they have way more. Non-nuclear nations such as Iran, Iraq, and North Korea are also targeted with nuclear weapons for the first time. Before the 1990s, the U.S. had targeted only other countries with nuclear weapons. The U.S. Department of Energy's nuclear laboratories, Los Alamos and Sandia in New Mexico, and Lawrence Livermore in California, are embarked on a second Manhattan Project. Well, let's just say they never stopped the first one. How about that? A massive scientific undertaking costing $5 to $6 billion annually for the next 10 to 15 years to design, test, and develop new nuclear weapons under the guise of ensuring the safety and reliability of the U.S. current stockpile of nuclear weapons. This is twice the cost of the original Manhattan Project, which developed the first 3 atomic bombs in the early 40s, and significantly more than the average of $3.8 billion spent on nuclear weapons during the Cold War. The Bush administration has pledged to fast-track plans to new national missile defense system. This runs the risk of destabilizing the many arms control treaties already negotiated between Russia and America. Who are the enemies that America is so frantically and expensively arming against at the dawn of the 21st century? Until September 11, 2001, America had no enemies with potential to wreak real harm on its land or people. It has friendly countries to the north and south, and vast oceans to the east and west. Under the current configuration, no foreign nation would ever think of invading the U.S., but it is now apparent that America has terrorist enemies, amorphous, difficult to track and locate, and almost impossible to extinguish by firepower or enormous arsenals of weapons. And on this, Dr. Caldicott, I really strongly disagree. I think America created these terrorists to promote war. I think that it was all set up by the industrial military complex, but I digress. The Pentagon and State Department justify the extraordinary U.S. military expenditure, now $310 billion annually, which is way more now, with potential threats from North Korea, Iran, Iraq, China, Russia, and possibly Libya, which they've decimated Libya by now. That's long gone. But of these, only the 5,000, and they decimated Iraq. Of these, only the 5,000 strategic nuclear weapons in Russia, half of which could hit U.S. cities 30 minutes after launching, pose a major threat to American security. More relevantly, as recent events have made all too clear, the largest nuclear stockpile in the world can accomplish little in the face of terrorists armed with box cutters, except possibly offering the potential for terrifying escalation of any ensuing conflict between nations. That's a funny thing. I can't believe people believe this bullshit 9/11 story. America currently spends 22 times as much on its military forces as all the other so-called rogue states or the states of concern: Iraq, Iran, Syria, North Korea, Cuba, and Libya. What were they called? The evil axis. Put together, when nullification of any of these threats they might pose could be achieved for a fraction of that amount. Get that? A fraction of that amount. Other possible explanations for America's immense military expenditures include: it fattens the coffers of weapons makers. Ding, 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 ding. It is a direct result of the rivalry between the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, and the Marines, each of whom want to have their own weapons systems. It elevates the prestige of top lawmakers within Congress and the White House, who are the recipients of huge donations from weapons manufacturers as they legislate for more weapons. A huge conventional and nuclear arsenal allows America to do what it will around the world with impunity. It is the iron hand in a velvet glove of U.S. corporate globalization. And it also provides complete cover. They don't have to talk about the nuclear contamination. We're talking about building weapons. We're not talking about the horrible things that this stuff has done to us. All of this is why Clinton's failure to seize the opportunity to eliminate or pare down the number of nuclear weapons in the world through rapid and realistic negotiation with Russia at a time when this was possible is so deeply tragic. Yeah, well, Dr. Caldicott, did you actually believe Bill Clinton would do jack? I mean, he set his priorities straight. What he wanted is what he got in the White House, and he paid 6 years of investigation for it. Ironically, it may well be the very fact that the September 11th attack and the U.S.'s resulting need to adopt a more conciliatory stance towards Russia that leads George W. Bush to enact the stockpile reductions that eluded Clinton in calmer times. The nuclear weapons establishment has 4 arms: the nuclear scientists, the military corporations, Congress, plus the White House, and the Pentagon. Subsequent chapters will look at each of these in turn. But first, let's set the stage by imagining what nuclear war might really look like. And that is chapter 2, folks. And we're going to end here. And I'm going to come back. I'm going to read this book. And I think I'm not going to skip around. I think I'm going to keep it in order. But I am going to be posting. I'm going to figure out how to find my glasses. Hold on. I'm really relatively blind without them. I put them down. I can barely see them. So I am going to read Dr. Caldicott's book front to back. I think with Professor Grossman, I am going to hop around in his book because it gets super technical and it's hard to share. I would encourage everybody to get Professor Grossman's book, the cover-up, What the Nuclear Industry Does Not Want You to Know. Get that online. Look at my videotape there and download it and take it and read it on yourself, because I'm going to be picking through his book. But this book, and you can actually pick this book up for just a few bucks online. Like, I think I got this book on Abe's Books for like $2.98, or maybe I bought it in a thrift store. Let's see if I can see the price. I don't remember, but it was like $2, $1, $3, nothing more than that. So I'm going to read this because I want this information at least documented in the YouTube world. So peace, you guys. Totally love you. It actually does feel good. It lightens my spirit to be able to come here and read these books, even though it's like the doomosphere, as Vegematic says. I never thought I'd get to be almost 63 and literally realize that the world is facing catastrophic events. And God forbid that Donald Trump, like the worst person in political life, has ever seated himself. He didn't seat himself. Russia put him there. And I'm really convinced that between the Democratic Party scrubbing Bernie Sanders and the things they did, that's why we got this monster. But if we have this out there and we listen to this is 14 years old, or I guess it's 16 years old now. If we listen to the information from here, maybe that will motivate people to actually get engaged, demand. I mean, we're going to have to keep pressing the button to these people. I don't know how much it will work. But for goodness sakes, it's not going to work if we do nothing. So if we even have a half a chance in hell, it's going to be because we decided we're going to make a difference. So put your courage feet on, you guys. I totally love you, and I will see you again. As Mark Brzezinski says, catch that.